Big Fani Willis loses another one, and that's in my opinion. Now, she does get a felony conviction. This one is involving Kenneth Chesebro. It is a plea deal, though, that is going to, I think, go away. We're going to dive into it. But remember this First Offender Act. Now, we can't say for certain whether his charges are going to go away because he still is going to be on probation for some period of time, and he could always fail probation or something could happen, which means the conviction will stick. But if all goes well, it seems like Kenneth Chesebro's felony charge will ultimately get deleted. We're going to take a look at the Georgia Code. We're also going to see what happened at the change of plea proceeding because this all happened immediately, very quickly. They were scheduled for jury selection in this case because trial was going to start early next week. But something happened. The parties came to an agreement, and at the end of the day, a plea deal has been struck. Now, there's a lot of interpretations on what's happening here. And previously, we've gone through the Sidney Powell plea deal, and she took a guilty plea that involved not one word of Donald Trump's name in it. Not in the proffer, not in the factual basis, nothing, nowhere, not even in the indictment or the charges. This one's different, though. We're going to hear Donald Trump's name come up a lot in this one. And this one is a felony, and we do have promises from Kenneth, apparently, to testify. So we're going to break this down and see what's happening here. But I still think this is not a victory for Fani. I think that her people were scrambling to give Kenneth a smoking sweetheart plea deal, and he had no choice but to take it. We'll point out when that happens, but let's dig in. All right, parties are getting situated.
Ready, Miss Smith?
Judge is calling the prosecutor. Are you ready?
Oh, okay. Let's go on the record with 23 SC 188947, State versus Kenneth Chesebro. We had begun our jury selection process this morning, but I've been informed that there is a change of plea. Is that correct, Mr. Wade?
That's correct, Judge.
Is that correct, Mr. Grumman?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Is this
Now, Nicholas Wade is the guy that I think was connected to Fani, and he's the special prosecutor who's getting paid big money to come and prosecute these cases. I think he had a relationship with Fani as a mentor or something.
negotiated?
It is, Judge.
All right. In that case, whenever counsel are ready and wherever is most convenient to Mr. Chesebro, you can stay seated, use that microphone or that microphone, but we could swear in Mr. Chesebro and proceed with the colloquy.
You want me at the podium, Judge?
Well, I think he's going to take the podium, so why don't we have you there?
Sorry. You stand right here.
Okay. Probably need you where we can hear you. Oh, did we really?
Yes, okay. I can stand. Can you hear me from here? Okay, cool.
All right, so we got
Judge, would you
dual
like me to
cams
give
now.
you the conditions of the sentence or the recommendation?
If it's negotiated, I think we can just start at the
Go through
top.
it? Okay, thank you. Mr. Chesebro, can you please raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give should be the truth and the whole truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Please lower your hand and state your true and correct legal name.
Kenneth John Chesebro.
And are you the Kenneth John Chesebro named in the indictment 23 SC 188947?
Yes.
Are you under the influence of any drugs, alcohol, or medication today?
No.
Is there any medication that you should be taking that you have not taken today?
No.
How old are you and how far did you go in school, sir?
62. I went through law school.
Are you able to read, write, and understand the English language?
Yes.
Have you gone over the indictment with your attorney, Mr. Grubman, as well as Mr. Aurora?
Yes.
Do you understand that you were originally charged in count 1 with RICO, count 9, conspiracy to commit impersonating a public officer, count 11, conspiracy to commit forgery, count 13, conspiracy to commit false filings and writings, count 15, conspiracy to commit filing false documents, count 17, conspiracy to commit forgery, count 19, conspiracy to commit false statements and writings?
Yes.
Okay, a lot of charges there, right? Including RICO. And we went through this in depth with Sidney Powell, but it's the same thing, okay? Whole slew of charges, meaning a bunch of them. She just listed, I don't know, half a dozen of them, and they're all getting dismissed except one.
Do you understand that the state that this is a negotiated plea, and as part of that agreement, the state has agreed to null pros counts 1, 9, 11, 13, 17, and 19, and will be moving forward on count 15 only?
One only,
Yes.
so dismissing 6.
Has your
moving on
attorney
one.
advised you of the minimum and maximum sentence for count 15, which is conspiracy to commit filing false documents?
Filing false documents, they say Chesebro was the guy behind the alternate electors plot.
Yes.
And do you understand that that carries a minimum of 1 year to a maximum of 5 years to serve?
I do.
Do you understand that you have the right to plead either guilty or not guilty to this charge? And if you plead not guilty, or if you plead not guilty or remain silent, you may receive a jury trial?
Yes.
Have you reviewed the waiver of rights form with your attorney?
I have.
And have you signed it as well,
Yes, I have.
along with Mr. Aurora?
Yes.
Judge, if I may, I'll sit back to the court. Have you had enough time to speak with your attorney, Mr. Aurora, and Mr. Grubman?
Yes.
Have you had an opportunity to talk with them about all the facts and circumstances regarding the charges in the indictment, including your potential defenses?
I I have.
Do you need more time to discuss your case with either of your attorneys?
No.
And are you satisfied with their services?
Yes.
Mr. Grubman,
Did you see that? Did you see his facial expression? Okay. Now, what we like to do when we listen to these is back out and see how they got here. Okay. Remember, this is like a pressure cooker situation. And maybe I should have framed that out a little bit better here. But we've got juries, like there are jurors sitting outside this courtroom. They're about to pick them. And they've got trial starting on Monday. Okay. So they are like, it is tense. Government probably does not want to go to trial, but they don't want to make that known. The defense really probably doesn't want to go to trial, but they don't want to make that known. And so everybody is scrambling and negotiating to try to figure out how can we plea this thing out. The judge too, because the alternative on this is a 6-week trial. You know how expensive that is for everybody? You know how much that costs the government to haul in juror after juror and then have them sit there for, 6 weeks, pay them for that, and then have Fani's office on this case, special counsel Wade Smith, all the witnesses being brought in, not to mention the opportunity cost. So then Donald Trump's team is going to get to see everything, and Giuliani's team is going to get to see everything, and it's going to be a big disaster. So Fani doesn't want it to go, I'll be honest, and the defense probably doesn't want it to go because he probably thinks he's going to get convicted on at least one of them on something and probably get some jail time. And so, but he's like racing till the day of trial, like the day of, man, they're picking the jury today. And watch his face when they ask him, are you satisfied with your attorney? Okay. It's a great question. He goes, oh yeah, actually his eyes go up like, yeah, they got me a smoking deal. And I'm going to explain because I watched some clips of this earlier. There's a segment in here where it sounds like they showed up today and the plea deal was jail time. Okay. The plea deal was 3 to 6 months of jail, and now it's no jail. In fact, now the felony is going to be dismissed, as we'll hear, because they're going to be prosecuting this under the First Offenders Act. Here, let's watch that one more time.
and are you satisfied with their services?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Grubman, do you waive formal reading of the indictment?
Yes, I am.
Yes.
Do you waive any and all defects that may lie within that indictment?
Yes.
Mr. Chesebro, have you been arrested on these charges that lies in indictment 23 SC 188947?
Yes.
The state is unaware of any outstanding warrants related to these charges. Do you or your attorney know of any outstanding warrants that involve these charges?
No.
No.
Do you understand that this is a negotiated plea, which means your attorneys and the state have reached a negotiated recommendation to make to the court?
I do.
Do you understand that the court is not bound by that recommendation and could sentence you to the maximum penalty for the charges?
I do.
Do you understand that the recommendation in this particular case as to count 15, conspiracy to commit filing false documents, is 5 years to be served on probation, a $5,000 fine, and that believe you're asking the court to treat you as a first offender? Is that correct?
Yes.
Yep. So they'll get first offender treatment, 5 years probation, $5,000 fine, and we'll see what the First Offender Act allows him to do.
I'm sorry, $5,000 restitution.
Restitution.
You understand that?
Yes.
And do you understand also special conditions of the probation is that you complete 100 hours of community service
Yes.
and that you write an apology letter to the citizens of the state of Georgia?
Which I have. Yes.
Yes. And that you truthfully testify at all hearings and trials involving co-defendants in this matter, that you have no communication with co-defendants, witnesses, or the media until all cases have been resolved against all co-defendants.
Yes.
And do you understand that you
So he already has to testify truthfully. We'll see if anybody wants to question him or interview him as a co-defendant. But the media one, I can understand that one too.
must give a full recorded proffer with the state
Okay.
that you continue to also provide documents and evidence subject to any lawful privileges asserted in good faith?
Yes.
And Your Honor,
Okay, so look, you're going to hear a lot from the people on the left. He's testifying against Trump. He's going to give him everything. He's agreeing that he's going to testify and honestly and openly. Like he promised, he has to do that anyways. He can testify, right, without being worried about incriminating himself. So he can testify, and he's not going to be giving over stuff that is privileged to the government because he doesn't have the right to waive the privileges between Trump or Giuliani or whomever, because the privilege holder are the people on the other side. So he can't give them certain things because he doesn't have the choice to breach that privilege. Trump would, and Trump is obviously not going to do that. So I'm not really sure what they're going to get. Now, we're going to listen to her proffer, and they've got Trump all over the place in this one. So yesterday, Sidney Powell's attorney, I don't know how, but kept out Trump's name from everything. That doesn't happen in this case. We'll continue.
the defendant has already done an apology letter, which the state will tender into evidence in State's Exhibit Number 1. And also this morning, Mr. Chesebro, along with counsel, did give a proffer to the state. And I believe there is an understanding that any outstanding emails, text message, or any of those things will be turned over to the state in a timely manner.
Indeed. Yes.
Text messages,
Mr. Chesebro,
emails-
do you understand, as I stated before,
Text messages, emails, all of that stuff will be turned over, but not the privilege stuff that would be between him and his clients.
if the judge does not follow the recommendation, you can withdraw your guilty plea and go forward with trial?
Yes.
Do you understand that this is a guilty plea, which, well, for your case, you're asking for first offender. So once you have completed first offender, you can honestly say that you have not been convicted of a felony. And I'll go over that with you a little bit more.
Did you hear that? As long as you complete everything, you can honestly say that you have not been convicted of a felony and you won't have a conviction. Okay, she wasn't that clear about that yesterday when we were hearing this with Sidney Powell, because they probably had already talked about that. But she was clear about it this time. If you complete everything, you can honestly say you are not a convicted felon. So it's like a diversion program, okay? He does his community service, he pays his fines, he spends 5 years on probation, and he is not even convicted. The felony disappears. Why are you not seeing that in the headlines anywhere? And it's going to be the same for Sidney, by the way. So rather than saying that all these people pled guilty to what? A disappearing charge that's going to be diverted at some point anyways? It's literally going to be dismissed? Listen to her say it again.
You're asking for first offender. So once you have completed first offender, you can honestly say that you have not been convicted of a felony. And I'll go over that with you a little bit more.
Yes, I understand.
How is that a win for Big Fani? Okay, she gets $5,000. She gets 100 hours of community service. She gets a proffer. Now she's trying to gather some evidence against Trump. Maybe that's her big victory, right? Lose these cases to go get the big one. Like, you could see how that would go. But this alone it's a fail. So is Sidney Powell's. They're not even going to end up with permanent convictions.
And do you understand that this,
if I'm a defense attorney, which I am, and if I were practicing again, that would be a tremendous victory to go from 7 felonies to 0? Are you kidding?
this plea may be used to enhance sentencing in any other convictions you may have in any other jurisdictions in the state of Georgia or outside of the state of Georgia and in federal courts?
Yes,
Do you understand that you are being placed on probation as part of this plea? As being on probation, you cannot violate any criminal laws of any governmental unit or any special conditions of the probation. Do you understand that? Do you understand that if you violate your probation or any other special conditions, you will be subject to revocation of the balance of the sentence?
yes,
Do you understand that you are not allowed to possess or use firearms as a result of this plea and when you're on probation?
yes,
Do you understand that if you are not a United States citizen,
Little different than Sidney's because he is on felony probation. Sidney was not.
this guilty plea will affect your immigration status and will result in deportation, just like a conviction at trial would, and that this is true regardless of any advice your attorney may have given you or anyone may have given you?
yes, fortunately, I am.
Do you understand that there may be other adverse or unfavorable consequences as a result of this guilty plea, just as there would be for a conviction after trial? For example, your guilty plea may affect your right to vote, your right to hold public office, the right to serve as a juror, the right to obtain a passport, the right to receive, possess, or transport firearms, the ability to obtain employment, and your membership of any state or federal bars of which you are a member.
Yes,
Do you understand that by pleading guilty, if you use, receive, possess, transport a firearm, or use a firearm in a crime, you will be guilty of a felony, which may carry a sentence of 1 to 15 years?
yes,
It's my understanding you're asking the court to treat you as a first offender. Is that correct?
correct.
Yes.
Have you gone over the First Offender Act with your attorneys, Mr. Grubman and Mr. Aurora?
Yes, I have.
Okay, so let's pause right there and let's take a look at the First Offender Act. Not heavy statute. We can go through it relatively quickly, but I want to just show you how this works because this is the same thing that happened to Sidney Powell. And it's pretty generous here, honestly. Here's what it says: probation prior to the adjudication of guilt. So think of it this way. Think of like they're holding this guilty plea right now. Okay, he's going through the paperwork. Yes, I plead guilty. Yes, blah, blah, blah. And they're just going to hold on to it. Like, they're not going to enter it into the record. I mean, it'll be entered into the record, somehow, but like, it's not going to be a guilty conviction. And they're just going to hold on to this thing. Now, if Chesebro or Powell, if they go out there and they insurrect an election again or something, right? They break the law again, then they don't need to do anything with this old case. They've already got their guilty plea. They just say, oh, well, you broke your probation. You've already pled guilty. You said you wouldn't break your probation terms. Now you have, therefore you're guilty. Okay, so you don't even have to adjudicate it. It's just done. You're convicted. It's over because we made a deal and you broke it. And this is a good way to have something that hangs over a defendant's head rather than just saying, like, you can also give somebody diversion before they plead guilty. Just say, okay, well, we're just going to give you the benefit of the doubt now, but then you have nothing to hang over their heads. So they're doing that right now. They're saying, look, when a defendant like here, Chesebro, has not been previously convicted, the court may, upon a guilty verdict or plea of guilty, but before an adjudication of guilt and without entering a judgment of guilt, and with the consent of the defendant, all of these things are true, defer the further proceedings. Okay, so kind of put the whole thing on hold for a while they're completing probation. And then place the defendant on probation. Now, the court has to review the criminal record prior to them going through this process, but when a court imposes a sentence, they've got to make some notations about it, and then they've got to, can also limit the case, right? This is where I think we're seeing the sealing stuff come in. So the case gets sealed immediately. Now, the court may then turn around and adjudicate the guilty plea. So now that thing that's kind of being held out, over their head, the court can turn around and say, yeah, look, you violated the term of your deal. Now you're just convicted. We don't even have to have a trial. We don't have to go through a change of plea proceeding. There's no negotiations. I can just sentence you as guilty. Now, this is the key point. If you are a defendant in this case, like Chesebro or Powell, a defendant's sentence pursuant to this article shall be exonerated of guilt and shall stand discharged as a matter of law as soon as they complete the terms of their probation, which includes the time of the sentence passing. You see that? As soon as they complete probation, they are exonerated of guilt. So Fani's not even going to get a conviction. You understand that? They won't have a criminal record at all. He's got one charge and it's going to go away. It's going to disappear. All right, let's go back to them. And they know it. Here.
Have you ever pled guilty or nolo to or ever been convicted of a felony in the state of Georgia or any other jurisdiction?
No.
Have you ever been sentenced for any crime, felony or misdemeanor under the First Offender Act?
No.
Has your attorney explained fully to you the First Offender Act?
Yes.
Do you understand that if you violate the terms of your first offender or commit a new offense while on first offender probation, your first offender status could be revoked, you could be adjudicated guilty, and you could be resentenced up to the maximum sentence for the charge in this indictment for which you are pleading?
Yes.
Do you understand that you waive any and all defenses, including any mental health defenses, by entering this guilty plea?
I do.
Do you understand that if you went to trial, you would have the right to trial by jury, the right to see, hear, and confront witnesses called to testify against you by the state, the right to testify or remain silent and not incriminate yourself? Do you understand that?
I do.
Do you understand that this guilty plea, you are giving up all of those rights, the right to a trial by jury, the right to remain silent and not to incriminate yourself, the right to confront witnesses, the right of assistance of counsel hired by you or appointed by the court if you could not afford one, the right of the presumption of innocence, the right to testify on your own behalf or to present evidence on your behalf, the right to subpoena witnesses and compel the production of evidence, and the right to have charges against you being proven beyond a reasonable doubt, and the right to appeal if you were convicted after trial. Do you understand that you're giving up each and every one of these rights by pleading guilty here today?
Yes, I understand all that.
Has anyone forced, threatened, or promised you anything for you to enter into this guilty plea?
No.
It is your decision to waive these rights and enter into this guilty plea because you are in fact guilty.
Yes.
How do you plead to count 15, conspiracy to commit filing false documents in indictment number 23 SC 188947?
Guilty.
Have you and your attorney signed that indictment?
Yes.
That's the original felony count and the original indictment.
Is your guilty plea freely and voluntary given with full knowledge of the charges against you?
Yes.
Do you understand that you only have a limited right to appeal this guilty plea?
Yes.
And do you understand that you would have 4 years from today's date in order to file a habeas corpus petition challenging the voluntariness of this plea?
I do.
And Your Honor, the has in fact checked and confirmed that Mr. Chesebro does not have any felony convictions at all, so he has no criminal history to the state's knowledge. If this case were to go to trial, the state would have shown the following.
Okay, so this is the factual basis, right? This is the proffer. And yesterday, it was very, very absent of one particular word, right? Donald Trump, the name Trump, didn't show up one time in Sidney Powell's exchange. And I think that's probably because Sidney Powell's lawyer was able to keep it out, okay? It wasn't in the original indictment, and Kenneth Chesebro was part of an indictment that had Trump's name, right? The different overt acts, the different counts, and Sidney's was not. But this is a little different, right? We're gonna hear Trump's name a lot in this because Kenneth was much more connected to him. So let's listen.
Between November 18th of 2020 and January 6th of 2021, the defendant and co-conspirators, Donald John Trump, Rudolph William Louis Giuliani, John Charles Eastman, Ray Stalling Smith III, Robert David Cheeley, Michael Roman, and others entered into a criminal conspiracy to cause certain other co-conspirators, including David James Schaefer, Sean Micah Thrasher Steele, and Kathleen Austin Latham, to falsely hold themselves out as the duly elected and qualified electors for the president and vice president from Georgia following the November 3rd, 2020 presidential election. Objectives of the criminal conspiracy included the following: 1, to recruit, certain individuals to falsely hold themselves out as the duly elected and qualified presidential electors from Georgia. 2, to create false electoral college documents, including a false certificate of vote purporting to have been made by the authority of the duly elected and qualified presidential electors from Georgia. 3, to falsely state that co-conspirator Donald John Trump had won all of Georgia's electoral college votes. And 4, to deliver those false documents to the Georgia Secretary of State, the Chief Judge of the Northern District of Georgia, the Archivist of the United States, and the President of the United States citizen being the Vice President.
Okay, so there's a distinction that I want to make here. We are hearing the name Donald Trump a lot, but that doesn't necessarily mean that Donald Trump is connected to this conduct. Okay, so just to be clear about that, I know it's a nuanced point, but it's true. In other words, Kenneth Chesebro could have been doing a bunch of Trump-related stuff, not at the direction of Donald Trump. He could have been working to get the alternate electors to go and, sign off on behalf of Donald J. Trump, and all of this was, done in Donald Trump's name, but that doesn't necessarily implicate Donald Trump, right? Like, they still have to make that connection that he's involved in this racketeering case. And by the way, he's not even charged with racketeering. Now they've dropped that down to this conspiracy that apparently was done on behalf of Donald Trump. But we're asking ourselves, what is he going to say that implicates Donald Trump specifically in a knowing criminal violation? I'm still skeptical. Let's go.
The purpose of creating these and delivering these false documents were to disrupt and delay the joint session of Congress on January the 6th, 2021, by using the false documents from Georgia and other states in an attempt to cause Vice President Michael Pence to violate the Electoral College Act and the United States Constitution.
Is there an I in there?
This was part of a multi-state criminal conspiracy to unlawfully overturn the results of the November 3rd, 2020 presidential election in favor of the co-conspirator Donald John Trump, who did not win that election. Specifically pertaining to count 15 of the indictment, federal laws require the Electoral College documents are maintained in multiple places, including the United States District Court, and where the electors met and cast votes. In the Northern District of Georgia, Electoral College documents are maintained in the clerk's office, administrative staff, with other non-case related documents, including standing orders and orders from the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals. Document maintained administrative safe are public records that can be inspected by members of the public, and members of the public can request certified copies of those documents that contain the clerk's official seal. Overt acts committed to affect this object of the conspiracy included, but are not limited to the following. 1, the defendant created and distributed false Electoral College documents to individuals in Georgia and other states in coordination with Donald John Trump for President, Inc.
Okay, so again, right, he coordinated with Donald J. Trump for President, Inc. We're asking about that. We're trying to follow the chain up to Donald Trump specifically, not the campaign, Donald Trump's knowledge. And, they're going to make the case that Donald Trump was running the campaign and he should have known and all the things. But we're following these connections very closely because we're trying to anticipate what Chesebro is going to say or testify to. And the government will come back out. The reason why these factual bases are appropriate or important is because they're going to point back to this. They're going to say, on the record, you admitted that you were part of this, right? What do you say to this now? And if he says something like, I didn't do that, they're going to say, we just read through the whole thing in court. You agreed to it.
Also known as the Trump campaign. The defendant provided detailed instructions to co-conspirators in Georgia and other states for creating and distributing these false documents. 3, co-conspirator Donald John Trump and John Charles Eastman solicited the director of the Republican National Committee to assist in recruiting persons to serve as fake electors in Georgia as well as in other states. Co-conspirators Rudolph William Louis Giuliani solicited persons to serve as false electors and provided strategic instructions to several co-conspirators concerning the execution of the conspiracy in multiple states. 5, co-conspirator David James Schaefer, Sean Micah Thrasher Steele, and Kathleen Austin Latham and others met at the Georgia State Capitol in Fulton County, Georgia on December the 14th, 2020, created false Electoral College documents that falsely stated that the co-conspirator Donald John Trump had received all of Georgia's Electoral College votes and delivered those false Electoral College documents to Congress and other governmental entities. The co-conspirators also attempted to deliver a copy of the false false electoral college documents to the Northern District of Georgia for the purposes of filing, entering.
I object to the whole plea because I don't know, is there such a thing as electoral college votes? I thought it was the electoral college votes. So I'd be like, Your Honor, I don't know what she's talking about. I've never heard of electoral college votes. Does that exist in America?
And recording those documents in that court, having reason to know that those documents contain materially false statements that the co-conspirators were the duly elected and qualified presidential electors of the state of Georgia. The defendant was personally present on the grounds of the United States Capitol during the disruption and delay of the joint session of Congress on January the 6th. That would be the factual basis for this plea, Your Honor.
Anything else to add, Ms. Young?
Okay, so there's a lot there, right? That was a lot meatier. Now, if you were with us yesterday when we were talking about Sidney Powell, like that, hers was like a paragraph, okay? That was a whole thing. That makes me a lot more nervous than Sidney Powell's does, right? Sidney Powell's was like really buttoned down. It's like she maybe did a thing sometime somewhere, very small, limited. It was like, they're not going to ask her anything. But that had Donald Trump's name all over the place. And so it would be very important to parse through that and see what you could extrapolate from there and how that might be hurtful to Trump.
Further from the state.
Is there any recommendation from the state, a behavioral incentive date, which I believe would have to be imposed in this sentence?
The state has no issue with that, Your Honor. We understand that it will be as such.
Well, what term would you recommend?
3 years.
All right. Mr. Grabman, are you in agreement with that?
Yes, Your Honor, just to clarify for the record that
Now, listen to this. His 5-year probation sentence is going to be more like 3.
given good behavior and following the rules in the statute, that Mr. Chesebro's probation would terminate after 3 years.
And are you requesting immediate sealing, Mr. Grabman?
Yes, sir.
All right. Is there anything else that you'd like to add on to the record, Mr. Grabman?
I would just like to thank the court, Your Honor. I know this has been a strain on court resources and a strain probably on your patience. And I know from time to time, I may have been one of the people that caused that, but thank you for your patience. And I really do appreciate it because I think the court's done a great job and we appreciate it on behalf of Mr. Chesebro.
That is a defense attorney who's thrilled that they got this done. Okay. Very excited. He knows that, not excited. He's thrilled. It's a great job for his client. So this is a victory from his perspective. And he's just thanking the court because they've got jurors sitting outside ready to go. And by the way, just to be clear, in most, well, I can't say most, but where I practiced a lot, if you waited until the day of trial to get a plea deal and the government's case was good. So like, let's say, for example, in the DUI case, right? The government generally has pretty good cases in DUIs because they just turn them. They're like, money makers for them. They have it all, rigged for them to win. So they know that, right? So sometimes they'll give you your best plea deal at the very first setting. And then as you get closer to trial, the plea deal gets worse. When the government's case is bad, the plea deal gets way better on the verge of trial, and they just negotiated. Now, let's listen.
Mr. Grumman, there's no need to thank me. We are here to give everyone their day in court. So I hope that's what we've been able to accomplish here today. Mr. Chesebro, I have a few questions for you, sir. Do you understand the remaining charge against you?
I do.
And you've heard the rights that you would give up by going forward with this plea. Do you still wish to waive those rights and proceed?
Yes.
And are you pleading guilty today because you agree that there is a factual basis that supports this remaining charge?
Yes, this charge.
Mr. Grubman, are you satisfied your client is competent in understanding that the plea is voluntary and that there is a sufficient...
Did you hear what he said? This charge? So, I'm not sure on it, but the factual basis that she read, that big, long paragraph, a lot of that might have nothing, zero to do with his charge, which is why I was kind of listening, that might be overbroad, right? So they might say all of that and they come back in and they say, oh yeah, but you did this and this and this and this. He says, no, I didn't. I didn't plead guilty to that. I didn't plead guilty to that either. I pled guilty to this thing, and that's the conduct that I admitted. And what you said in that factual basis, it's way overbroad. It encompasses that little subset of conduct, but I didn't plead guilty to all that crap that you said. So that's why I was kind of curious what this defense attorney did. Like if he, did they sit down and redline that? Was that a part of the negotiation? Did he say, yeah, sure. Like, did Tishy say, her office, we'll give you this diversion deal where your felony will go away, but we want a very meaty proffer. Like we want a factual basis that's just filled with Trump, Trump, Trump. That might lead me to believe that maybe he's willing to testify against Trump, right? But we don't know. But what he said right there was, yeah, only for this charge. He's a lawyer. He knows. He's not stupid. He knows that she just went on a little rant and rave, but whatever. That's fine. She can do it. But he's only pleading guilty to one thing, not 7, and not RICO.
Factual basis.
Yes, Your Honor. And there is one thing that I was looking over to my colleagues. We have an agreement. I believe that this state will agree this does not constitute a crime of moral turpitude.
That is correct, Your Honor.
All right. Crime of moral turpitude, we explained on the City Powell plea, but that is a crime like dishonesty. You're trying to defraud somebody. So they're going to say conspiracy to file false election documents, even though it's a felony, it's not a crime of moral turpitude per the court entry. It's not one of those crimes of dishonesty, and it's going to be dismissed.
Mr. Chesebro,
Have that in the sentencing sheet. That would be great. Thank you.
understood. And I hear that that is without objection from the state, and so consistent with the other resolutions in this case. We'll include that on any final disposition form. Mr. Chesebro, do you have any kind of a weapons carry license in the state of Georgia or elsewhere?
No.
Well, I agree and find that there's a sufficient factual basis for the charges as proffered by the state. And I find that this plea of guilty is knowingly, voluntarily, and intelligently entered. And Mr. Chesebro has asked to be sentenced under the First Offender Act without objection from the state. And I'll approve that request with full adjudication. But I must notify you, sir,
You
that
hear what he said? We're going to withhold adjudication, not going to be convicted.
the plea can't be withdrawn simply because you don't abide by the terms of the sentence. And the terms of that sentence would be as recommended by the parties on the sole count 15. The sentence would be 5 years probation. There would be payment of $5,000 of restitution.
State of Georgia.
All right. All right. And that will be later clarified through probation and reflected in the final disposition form.
And Your Honor, we will provide that information to probation as to exactly who that payment needs to go to.
Understood. And as we've done before, the specific language of these special conditions is agreed to by the council. If you could email us to those, we'll make sure they're reflected appropriately.
And Your Honor, sorry to interrupt,
Sure.
but Mr. Chesebro does live in Puerto Rico. So to the extent we could recommend to the probation office that his probation be transferred there,
It's coming
that
up.
would
Listen.
obviously be convenient. But
That might complicate things. We do have our representative from probation here today, Miss Pretty, who is usually able to enlighten us on these kind of complications. Miss Pretty, any thoughts when we have someone who's in one of the U.S. territories under supervision?
That I would have to contact the supervisor about him being in Puerto Rico and how that transfer would happen. Normally in other states, we would just do paperwork for the ICOTS and he would contact the officer, but this is in another area. So if you give me 5-10 minutes, I can get the supervisor on the phone and find out.
Okay, so
the meaning to suggest that this would be something.
no, I understand, Mr. Grumman. Let me ask this. Is Mr. Chesebro planning to leave Georgia today,
Listen.
or was he planning to stay here at least for a few days until we sorted things
Yeah,
out?
he was planning on staying here for 3 to 6 months.
I would think so.
Oh!
Today, I
Okay, did you hear that? Is he planning on leaving here today? No, he was planning on staying here for 3 to 6 months. Okay, his plea deal was jail time when they showed up today. They wanted 6 months jail from Fanny's office. Okay, he was prepared. He was ready to go. That was the original deal. In fact, they were thinking about taking that deal, is what I would guess. A 3 to 6 month deal. And that attorney, shout out to this attorney and this defense team. See, they're smiling here. They wanted 3 to 6 months. And he said, we're not taking it. We're not taking 3 to 6 months. Give us a no jail plea and give us a diversion or we're going to trial. All right. That's some good lawyering right there. Give it to us or else we'll bring the jury in. And they say, we don't want to bring the jury in. As long as your client pleads to one felony, we'll dismiss it, the whole thing. Amazing, right? So it's those little things that you catch. And so you know now, they wanted jail. Okay, they were trying to bluff this thing. That's how you know they fell. Okay, so Fanny dropped it. Okay, she lost this one. They won, which is why they took this deal. They didn't cave, Fanny caved. And sorry, 3 to 6 months of trial time. Okay, that's also the trial time too.
speak up on this topic that you were gonna probably leave today, or were you gonna?
No, I'm perfectly willing to stay for 3 or 4 days to be around to handle the logistical elements of this. No
Okay.
problem.
All right. I think then
Okay, so just to be clear, so that 3 to 6 months could have been about the trial time too. It might not have been about the jail time. I could have been wrong on that. I might have misread that, but here, let's
that's what we have to do to go forward on the plea today. We'll finalize it. And then as we learn from probation, what logistically needs to happen to have it transferred,
No, it's the jail time.
we can. Usually that takes some time, but I think we'll see what we can do. And if there's any kind of a modification we need to do in order to address these concerns, we can take that up after the plea has been finalized. So
Okay, yeah, it's the jail time because the trial's not going to be a 3 to 6 months trial, right? They wanted him to serve jail 3 to 6 months. What I'm guessing is this was an open-ended plea deal. So they said, your client can plead guilty, but we want 3 to 6. We'll leave it up to the judge. And you can have that. The 3 minimum, 6 max. We'll leave it up to the judge to pick it. So 3 to 6 months is what he was prepared to do. You know, a trial would be about 6 weeks is I think what they were saying. So I was thinking maybe he was planning to be there for the trial for 3 to 6 months. I don't think so. I think it's for the jail time because his trial would have been about 6 weeks. So they showed up for a plea, 3 to 6. He gets a plea for 0, smoking deal.
We'll follow up with you on that. Was there anything else, Mr. Grubman?
Nothing, Your Honor.
Okay.
Good.
I just wanted to thank you for the way you've handled these proceedings.
Well, I appreciate it, Mr. Chesebro. We're not done yet. I've still got some special conditions,
Okay.
which is that you have to complete 100 hours of community service as recommended by the state. Would have to write an apology letter, which you've already handed to the court and satisfied. You're to testify truthfully in any other proceedings in this case against any and all co-defendants.
Already had to do that.
And that you're to have no contact with any members of the media, any co-defendants, or any potential witnesses, and that you're to provide a full proffer and any all relevant documents to the state, which again, the state has said that you have satisfied. The case would be immediately sealed under first offender. There'd be a behavioral incentive
Sealed.
date of 3 years. So just
Sealed, case is sealed. If he's on good behavior, 3 years is the limit. He's off probation, so it's not even 5 years. And then the case will be dismissed. Incredible.
having now formally declared the sentence on the record, was there anything else that Ms. Young, you think I neglected to add or that we need to have on the record?
Don't believe so, Your Honor.
Okay. All right, Mr. Grubman.
Nothing, Your Honor.
All right. Good luck, Mr. Chesebro.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Oh boy, that is good stuff. That's pretty funny. So we see no jail, and it sounds like they wanted jail at that very end moment. We saw he was planning to be there for 3 to 6 months. Woo! Now he gets no jail time. So that's a pretty big victory for Kenneth Chesebro. And anytime something like that happens, anytime you see all those last minute things happen, it is an indicator in my mind that Fani doesn't have the goods. She's got plea deals for 3 people. None of the charges will stick, at least for Sidney and Chesebro. They will not be criminal convicts at all. They will not have felony convictions. They will not have misdemeanor convictions. So what did she get at all? Now, what she has gotten is some cooperation and some silence out of them until the next election, right? 3 years on probation for him, 5 years for, or 6 years for Sidney. That means that they're going to be kind of out of the pocket for a while, which is of course what they want. So Big Fani, in my opinion, loses another one. Okay. She's supposed to have all these people dead to rights, and she's not even going to get convictions out of them. Pathetic. We'll continue to cover, my friends. Thank you for inviting somebody over here to join us as we continue to cover this case and more. We'd love to see you join us at robertgovea.com as well. So you can sign up for our daily newsletter, get all these stories delivered right to your inbox, and we'll see you on the next one.